If you can't just accept "good job" without immediately hunting for the flaw nobody else noticed. If winning didn't actually feel like winning long enough to enjoy it before your brain moved straight to the next thing you needed to prove. If you've watched someone need to win every single argument, even the pointless ones, and wondered what that's actually costing them, welcome. This isn't about low self-esteem in the way most people picture it. Or maybe you know someone like this. The person who over-prepares for a conversation that didn't need preparing for. The friend who gets strangely defensive about a compliment, like it was an accusation. The coworker who somehow needs to be the smartest person in every single meeting, even the boring ones. Here's the first thing worth getting right, because the term gets misused constantly. Alfred Adler, who coined this, wasn't describing the feeling of inferiority itself. He argued almost everyone feels it as a kid, small, dependent, weaker than the adults around you. It's basically universal. The actual complex isn't the feeling. It's what someone builds on top of it to avoid ever feeling it again. The inferiority stays invisible. The compensation is the only part anyone else ever sees. Part of what makes this so persistent is that the brain is already primed for it before any of this even starts. Humans automatically track prestige, popularity, and competence in the people around them, an old instinct that once helped navigate group hierarchies. For most people, that system runs quietly in the background. For someone carrying an inferiority complex, it gets turned up until every room feels like a ranking, and the ranking always puts them somewhere lower than they'd like. That distortion isn't just a mood. Psychologists studying attention have found that expectation actually shapes what you notice, so someone convinced they're behind will genuinely register other people's promotions, nicer cars, easier confidence, while their own evidence to the contrary slides right past unnoticed. And that compensation can point in two completely opposite directions, which is why this is so easy to miss in people. For some, it becomes fuel, relentless preparation, extraordinary effort, the kind of drive that builds careers and empires, all quietly powered by never wanting to feel behind again. For others, it becomes the opposite, procrastinating, showing up unprepared, avoiding the opportunity entirely. Psychologists call this second pattern self-handicapping. If you never really tried, a loss doesn't count as proof of anything. Both versions come from the exact same root. One just looks like ambition, and the other looks like giving up before it starts. Here's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes the compensation doesn't stay contained to just one person's own effort. Research on social comparison has found that putting someone else down can temporarily boost the person doing it, a kind of quick fix through comparison. The mocking, the unnecessary criticism, the need to point out someone else's mistake in a meeting that didn't call for it, a lot of that isn't really about the other person at all. It's someone quietly repositioning themselves on a ladder that only exists in their own head. And even genuine wins have a way of not landing the way you'd expect. If success gets explained away every single time, "I got lucky, they weren't paying attention, anyone could have done that," then winning stops providing any relief. The bar just moves again. Yesterday's impossible goal quietly becomes today's bare minimum, and the finish line keeps sliding forward exactly as fast as someone runs toward it. Memory quietly takes sides in all of this too. People carrying chronic self-doubt tend to remember failures in sharp detail, while successes fade fast, so the internal case against themselves keeps looking airtight. Not because the evidence actually favors it, but because the favorable evidence simply doesn't stick around as long. Sometimes the body gives away what the mouth won't say either. Closed posture, less eye contact, arms pulled in protectively, hesitant speech. None of that is a universal tell on its own, but it's often the clearest signal in the room that someone is quietly running an internal evaluation nobody else can see. So, why does this pattern take hold in some people and not others? Adler's own answer wasn't abstract. It came from his own childhood. He was a sickly kid, had rickets, nearly died of pneumonia around age 5, spent years watching healthier children move through the world with an ease he didn't have. His entire theory of striving and compensation grew directly out of that experience, not out of a textbook. And the comparing itself starts far earlier than most adults assume. Developmental psychologists have found kids as young as elementary school are already sizing themselves up against classmates on intelligence, athletic ability, and popularity, long before anyone's explained what any of that means. The foundation gets poured a lot earlier than the house gets built on top of it. There's also a much older piece of this that has nothing to do with any one childhood. Humans evolved comparing themselves within groups of maybe 100 or 200 people, roughly the size of an ancient tribe. That system was never built to process what it's asked to handle now. Comparing yourself against billionaires, Olympic athletes, and the most photogenic version of thousands of strangers, all before you've finished breakfast. The mechanism is ancient. The scale it's operating at is brand new, and it wasn't built for this much input. Now here's the part almost nobody catches, and it flips something people usually assume about competence and confidence. You'd think the most skilled people would feel the least inferior since they've actually got the evidence to back themselves up. Often the opposite happens. Highly competent people sometimes underestimate themselves specifically because they assume something easy for them must be equally easy for everyone else, so their own skill doesn't register as anything special. Competence and insecurity turn out to coexist far more often than the simple story allows for. The person who seems to have it all figured out professionally can be running the exact same inferiority loop as anyone else, just with better credentials attached to it. Some of the everyday texture of this pattern is easy to spot once you know what you're looking at. A neutral comment in a meeting gets replayed for hours as a hidden insult. A mistake stops being "I got this wrong" and becomes "I'm a failure," with nothing in between the two. And sometimes the compensation shows up in what someone buys rather than what they do. Certain purchases becoming especially appealing exactly when someone feels most socially threatened. Less about wanting the object and more about needing the message it sends to everyone watching. None of this means ambition or hard work is secretly a red flag, and it's worth being clear about that. Psychologically secure people compare themselves to others too. Research is pretty consistent on that. The difference isn't that they never compare. It's that the comparison fades fast and doesn't get to decide anything important about how they see themselves. The healthiest version of this was never about feeling superior to anyone. It's closer to a much quieter idea that your worth doesn't evaporate just because someone else happens to be exceptional in the same room. Subscribe and watch this video next.